Salutations, everyone. Welcome back to another Total Warhammer 3 guide for Immortal Empires, obviously still in beta. So, today we're going to be talking about the Beastmen. This is quite a unique faction. In fact, so unique to the point that the structure of this video will be different than my other guides. Considering the Beastmen basically have no economy, we will be skipping that step. So, and these different sections should all be chaptered below. We will first cover the unique concept and mechanics of the Beastmen, moving further on to how they play and all the details, little tricks around that. Further on, we'll go over their units, then their technology, and finally we'll cover the various lords, their starting locations, and any basic strategies around them. And if you do enjoy the video, please do leave a like and a comment. And if you haven't subscribed and want to see more of these, please do that and ring the bell. Also, by the way, this is all in one part of a giant playlist of Total Warhammer 3 guides, so by all means, go check those out as well. Okay, so the Beastmen are well, they're not entirely a horde faction like they used to be, but they're pretty close. So the Beastmen exist as agents of chaos out to destroy the factions of good or you could lump them together as order. They're not demons, but they're not human, elf, dwarf, or lizardmen or skaven at all. They're kind of a mutated humans. They play as a horde faction with some occupation of settlements, and we'll talk about that later on. But the first thing to note is they have a horde tree building, similar to how the Vampire Coast does and stuff. Basically, you have one settlement here with your lord. You level it up through various different growths. You build buildings. You don't really make any money per se from it, which is fine because the Beastmen don't have to deal with money really at all, other than affording the cost of new buildings. And if you lose your lord, though, the horde building will go away. If it's not a legendary lord, the lord will die and you'll lose it. Even with legendary lords, though, you'll be starting from scratch. Now, at the start of the game, you're only going to have one horde. And unless you have a settlement with a herdstone in it, which is one of their mechanics, if you then lose that army, it's game over. If you don't have a herdstone down, you should always make sure you have two armies running around the map if you can. Once you start putting down herdstones everywhere, you should be fine. So what is a herdstone? Well, a herdstone has some rather unique mechanics. And in fact, we're going to jump to a different start so I can show you that. Okay, here we are. We have jumped to Taurox Black Hole here. So this is a herdstone. It is a 3-building settlement, one of which is taken up by the herdstone. It's got a pretty good garrison, increase the amount of recruitment in the area, and increase ambush success. These are very important. You have a limited amount of herdstone shards to use. Thankfully, even if you lose a herdstone, you regain the shards, so don't worry about throwing down the herdstones that much. You'll get more through upgrades and progress over here with ruination. Herdstones, however, are the key essential part of your play. What you're going to do is when you conquer a settlement, unless you already have a herdstone down and no extra ones, you'll have the ability to occupy it and place a herdstone. Once a herdstone is placed, it will start a blood ground, which everything here, is this not working? Everything here in red is part of this blood ground. Any better battles done in this area will improve the herdstone, and as it builds up the herdstone, it will get more and more devastation. And when devastation reaches 10, which is basically just one settlement taken, you can then form a ritual to convert devastation to marks of ruination, which is this mechanic here, and we'll cover that in a minute. If you fight more battles, you can build it up higher and higher and higher. I don't recommend you trigger the rituals ever at the base level, unless you're just very quickly trying to set one up and then finish the ritual, or you happen to place in a bad spot where you can't do the other blood grounds because they belong to a great faction or something. Suffice to say, herdstones are very important, and fighting battles in this area around them is very strong. It is important to note that because you have a herdstone in the area, any raised settlements cannot be recolonized while that herdstone is in the area and still standing. Which means if you raise the whole area and then do the ritual, no one will be able to settle in that area unless they kill your herdstone. Herdstones have a decent garrison, and as you level them up, get to some pretty powerful defenses. You also have a variety of buildings you can build. These are the 4 other buildings you can build right here, which is quite important because this is kind of the only other choice you get. Even though it has 3 slots, 2 buildings. So the first one, recruitment, replenishment, chaos, provides a garrison. It's decent. This one you would use if you were fighting lots of battles in a small area to heal your army, recruit more units. Over here, this one gives you magic in all of the blood ground and gives you sight and dread from battles faction wide. We'll talk about dread later. Further on, you've got the Winds of Malady. This has lowers enemy movement in the area, wins the enemy army, and has a small chance of spreading a plague. This one is extraordinarily powerful. Plagues are a great defensive tool for Beastmen. And then finally, the last one is ammo and reload time and missile damage. If you're specializing in any range stuff, this will strengthen that. In my opinion, the one you're probably most likely going to want to take is the Winds of Malady tree here. If you get the plague, it will cause immense attrition and weakness towards the enemy. It's the best one for defense, plus the garrison fully upgraded, you get a giant, which is a strong unit. If you don't want to go Storm of Suffering, I don't really recommend the replenishment or the ammo. You're almost better off with the Winds of Magic. Not that you'll probably use tons of magic, but the view of all the regions in the area will give you nice vision if someone is approaching your herdstone to destroy it, so that you can respond to try and save it. And that is herdstones. And it's important to note that if you want to recruit a large amount of units quickly, you have to do it at a herdstone. Outside of that, you have limited recruitment, even in your armies. Now, at a herdstone, and we'll just finish it here, you have a large amount of recruitment. You can build this up even more. I've got 4 here. You could end up with more. And that leads us into the next concept, which is units. You'll notice none of these cost any money to recruit. That is important. The Beastmen don't have to pay recruitment costs unless you're doing stuff with, suffice to say, you don't have recruitment costs for most of your normal units. So what this means is you can train as many of these units for free as you want. They also don't have an upkeep cost, which is quite nice, which means your favor here is only going to ever change when you build buildings offhand. And the reason this is a powerful and yet a limiting mechanic for these guys is, yes, you can create tons of your weakest units and spam a full army and stuff. Getting another army, though, starts to become a little bit more harder to field because you've got a limit on the amount of lords you can have, which is tied to some degree to your levels of your herdstones. Sorry, your ruination marks. And we'll touch on ruination later, but let's talk more about this unit cap. So you'll notice if we look here, it says 2 of 2. You've already recruited the maximum number. Construct additional buildings to increase the capacity. Okay. Well, if we look at this, there's no capacity increase here. The text is a bit misleading. Instead, in order to recruit the capacity, you use another currency. Beastmen have 3: favor, herdstones, and dread. Dread is the important one. And in fact, dread is the only one that you can easily get incomes from by building it in your horde building. You can actually generate it. Hordes use, or in this case, the Beastmen hordes use dread to buy upgrades. So every unit except your base one comes with a cap. You can then spend dread to improve the cap. And this is a whole mechanic here. And the game will try and explain it to you the first time you go into it. Or you can do like help to get more information, but we'll go over it quickly. So if we have a limit of 2 here, if we pay this, we increase it by 2. Then it would be 4. If we go back to the recruitment tab, ta-da, now we should be able to recruit more of that. This is very strong in the sense that it allows you to recruit armies quickly and cheaply. and to have very strong armies without having to worry about upkeep. The Beastmen can, boom, if you're winning as them, you'll tend to keep winning as them. If you start running into problems early on, you'll have problems for a long time. Very much a feast or famine faction. This applies to all of them. However, some of these are locked behind marks of ruination, which we will cover. In order to unlock these units, even if you get like buildings to build them, you still can't do it until you get enough marks of ruination. Now, Lords and Heroes, this is kind of unique for the Beastmen. These are the 3 other legendary Beastmen Lords. Obviously, it changes if you're not playing Taurox, but I figured we'd show him here. You can save or recruit legendary lords if you get enough dread. Now, a legendary lord is very nice because if they go out and die, you get them back rather than losing all the levels you may have grabbed. If these guys are alive on the map when you get them, you'll take their faction. If they're dead on the map, you can still do this, which is extraordinarily powerful. Especially with the changes to Confederation, it's much easier for the Beastmen to accumulate all the legendary lords. Over here, here's your hero capacity, which starts at 1. Again, paying dread to unlock more Gorbals, Wargors, and Bray Shamans. Fighters, leaders, magic users, roughly. Over here is upgrades. Now, this is probably going to be the most important tree outside of the unit caps for you for some time. If you get enough dread, you can then buy upgrades to your herdstones. Why does this matter? Well, the higher herdstones obviously have a garrison, and they're constructed at level already. You don't have to spend time getting growth and then upgrading them. All told, you want to get herdstones at 5. They have a massive garrison. They can have great effect, better recruitment. It's worth using. Outside of that, you have all these. The top line here applies to horde armies. So if you have a new horde army, this will give you better buildings at a higher level. Obviously, it costs a fair amount of dread to get them. The one in the middle is quite interesting. It gives you an additional army capacity. Do note, you have to hit Ruination level 8 to get this, unlike some of these other ones, which you can just start from the beginning. Down here, recruit Lords and Heroes at higher level. All told, you get them at 15, meaning it's very easy to get Immortal Lords and Heroes as the Beastmen. And the last one here is kind of an odd one. This is your items. You pay a certain amount of favor. This is one of the few uses you have for money outside of building buildings to unlock these items, which then, of course, you can equip on your Lords and Heroes. It's worth noting that Champion's Essence here is really nice, not only for the ward save and attack, but also for the perfect vigor. Can be very strong if stuck on a melee hero. Gets them a lot stronger and harder to kill. Otherwise, these are pretty standard ones. The banners here, you put on actual units and they apply this. The Aura of Madness plus physical resistance can be extraordinarily powerful. It is worth its 10,000 favor cost, but just be aware it's a big investment. And that is covering dread. So then the last mechanic here, outside of herdstones, which obviously you get more as you level this up, is the last major one is Marks of Ruination. This is basically your progress towards the end game. And it gives a nice little description there. Once you raise your settlement, you do the ritual, you get Marks of Ruination. As you build up Marks of Ruination, you unlock new units. So the first one, once you hit 1, you unlock all the units below, which is important because they're still basic units. Further on, this one gives you an army capacity, unlocks even higher units. This one unlocks most of your highest level units, makes another army free. So now you could have 3 horde armies roaming the world, or 1 defending, etc., etc. This one, top of the line, this gets you more Minotaurs, and it gets you another herd shard, meaning you can be running 2 herd stones on the map at once. Further on, this gives you another 1, so you can now be running 3. Further on, army capacity up. Doesn't actually add too much more because you've pretty much maxed everything out. More herd stones, more army, and then finally, Ruination level 8. 4 unlocks the final battle, gives you lots of herd stone shards, makes all your armies immune to attrition, and makes constructing buildings rather cheap. Now, if you remember this tech here that gives, Rewards of Dread upgrade here under upgrades, you have to hit level 8 in order to unlock this. By the time you hit level 8, you're supporting 4 armies anyway. So it's not that useful of a one. So just don't think you're going to suddenly buy that and get extra armies, because it doesn't work that way. And the other thing here is this Dark Moon, which is this world has, I think, 2 moons. I'm not entirely sure. One of them is kind of an evil moon. It supports and buffs the Beastmen as it progresses through its different phases. And sometimes you'll get events concerning it. Sometimes you'll get negative, semi-negative events. It depends. It's just a neat little cool mechanic that the Beastmen deal with. Now, we are on Taurox the Black Bull here, and I'm going to just talk about his mechanic here since we're talking game mechanics. Taurox is unique among the Beastmen Lords because he has access to a rampage. As he fights successive battles, he builds up his momentum here. Once he hits a certain level, he can take a reward, locking it, and getting the various levels of bonuses associated with it. This builds up as he progresses through this tree. In order to unlock one of his other mechanics, you have to do at least a harsh rampage streak here, which is a very important ability for dealing with Taurox, however you want to say it. Because as he builds it up, he has this movement range. He can then spend his momentum and stuff to replenish his movement range, meaning he can fight a battle, replenish it, move a full movement again, and fight another battle. You can really race all over the map super, super fast using this ability. They have changed it, and Taurox is much weaker than Total Warhammer 2. Just aware, he's not as ridiculously broken as he was. He's still really strong. Also, I should mention the other mechanic here for Beastmen in general. It's pretty simple. This is Bestial Rage. As it builds up, you get more growth. If it goes down, you have problems. The further and further you go down, your growth gets affected. Higher up you get, the better bonuses you will pick up. You get growth and replenishment. It's just kind of honestly, I'd say a leftover mechanic from their earlier rounds. It's kind of a neat one. Overall, the Beastmen have plenty of unique mechanics. Taurox has basically 2 more. Other interesting things, which I will mention here, not that they're per se mechanics, but they do exist. First one is Beastmen, similar to Skaven, have a chance of ambushing anytime they attack, allowing you to charge into much larger groupings of enemies than you'd expect. Taurox has a particularly unique raiding stance where he can raid and then he gets a bonus movement, which is kind of strange, but that's how it goes. Beastmen, they can do this hidden encampment where they cannot be attacked or found really while encamped, allowing you to raid an enemy settlement and then hide and then either ambush armies coming to colonize it or run away from the armies trying to wipe you out. They also have access to the Beast Pass, which is very similar to the underways of the Dwarves and Skaven and Greenskin. It's just basically a renamed thing, allows you to cross terrain, makes you immune to attrition, you can be intercepted and die. And I believe that it is all the stuff associated with the Beastmen. If I've missed anything, I apologize. So let's talk Beastmen units. So this is a little bit tricky to show you all of it, especially because you got to remember that capacity is in fact a thing you have to be aware of. So to start off, you've got your base 3. You've got Morghur Spearman Herd, which are basically a cheap spearman unit, anti-large. You can build them in large numbers, infinitely large numbers. Don't expect them to kill much. They don't even really do well against basic infantry. However, they are expendable, meaning that losing them does not affect your larger units. So it is, considering they're free to build and maintain, there is no excuse for you not to have a full 20 stack on the battlefield at any time. These guys will go out, they will die. Who cares, really? They're woodsmen, which is nice. They have charge reflection, meaning these guys are actually slightly better against cav than their stats would indicate. And finally, this is something that applies to a half decent amount of beastmen. There are some variations. It is a bonus to how they fight. Beastmen are particularly prone to violence. The next one here, we have Morghur Raiders, which are your basic ranged archers. They're not particularly good at the role, but they're not particularly awful at it. Low to medium range, I would say. They're not long, but they're not tiny short range of like axe throwers. They do decent melee damage. They are half decent at fighting as well. They move invisible, so you can set up some nice ambushes with them. And they're not too terrible in melee combat. and they're expendable, so you don't have to really worry that much about losing them. Finally, you have the Chaos Warhounds. A lot of Chaos factions have these Warhounds. If you kind of were wondering if the Beastmen get cav units, this is kind of their earliest one they get. It moves fast, hits hard, good at running off archers and artillery or chasing fleeing units, which the other Beastmen units are not particularly fast at doing. Further on, we have your base infantry building. This gives you access to Morghur herds, which are these things, but upgraded. First off, they give them axes and shields. Overall, it is an improvement from the Morghur spearmen, but they don't fight cav. I tend to use this a lot if I know I'm not going to be fighting cav factions. You don't really need to worry about them surviving since you can just rebuild them. On the other hand, you have them with shields, which are spearmen and shields. Spearmen with shields. There we go. Better melee defense. They'll last longer. They prove to be more of a meat shield than anything else. They're expendable. If you've watched my Bretonnian guide, these are kind of like the Bretonnian peasant type units. They're trash. They do decent damage compared to some other trash units in the game, but don't expect them to win any battles from you. They're there to provide numbers and anti-cav charges. That's about it. Further on, we get into the first actual units that will help you kill things. These are the Gore herds. These are like super versions of the Ungors. They're like better elite soldiers for them. Again, still with Primal Fury, so they get all these bonuses to attack, movement, and immune to psychology is kind of huge for the Beastmen. These ones are still counted as a tier 1 infantry unit, but they are better. If you look at the stats here, 22 up into 26, these guys will wreck the lower level units. You start out with a low level capacity of them too, which obviously, as I showed, you can upgrade. It's really worth expanding this capacity just so that you don't have to deal with these really bad units lower on. Further on, you have Gore herds without shields. So you have ones with shields and then without shields. Honestly, I would recommend just the ones with shields. Technically, the Gore horde without shields is rated as a tier 2 unit. I honestly think they both should either be tier 2 or they should both be tier 1. The ones with shields I think are better because they don't die to range as easily. That's pretty much it. And finally, at the top, you have access to a Morghur, which is your pretty standard melee fighter. They do decent damage. However, it is important to note they provide a melee defense and leadership buff to allies in a range around them. And they are very good at blocking ranged. These are a fairly solid melee unit you can throw into most things, and outside of being in melee combat for ages, lords, or other heroes, they will kill most everything in their path. And then finally, you have Bestigore herds, which are a upgrade from the Gore horde without shields, because they still don't have shields, but overall are a stronger unit that is armor piercing and adding a nice unit, good at killing like dwarves. It's funny how dwarves are always my armor example, but that's because dwarves have a lot of armor. In the case of Beastmen, it might be the Dark Elves or the Empire or the Warriors of Chaos more than dwarves. Overall, good unit. It's overshadowed by some of the other Beastmen unit at this tier, but you won't go wrong using them. Further over here, we have the Creature's Den. So this is where you get Warhounds with poison. Really, the only difference is the poison. If you can, take the ones with poison rather than not, because poison weakens the enemies so that your other units can kill them. Then you have access to Harpies. Honestly, you really don't need to use this at all. You could bring one or two of them if you want to try and drive off artillery or range that you don't think you'll be able to get too quickly. Like if you're fighting the dwarves and they've got a shield wall with a catapult, this unit, since it flies, will solve the problem, but you have better flying unit later on. The other one is a Razorgore herd. So kind of similar to the Chaos Warhounds, but with better combat ability, I guess, if that makes sense. The stat here is similar, but the big difference is their weapon strength is more than twice the damage, and it's armor piercing. So not as good at hitting, but will do more damage when it does. Honestly, once I get these, I rarely ever use the Chaos Warhounds. I like the Razorgores better. They do have the tendency to go on a rampage and go nuts, but hey, they're cheap. It can easily be replaced by most hordes. And then moving on, we get to some of the actually better units. First off, you have a Manticore, flying unit that is way better than the Harpies in every way, shape, or form. Once you get this, you should never take a Harpy to the battle. These guys will do the Harpy's job and actually be able to fight other stuff. They do apply terror, which is always nice. Overall, really one of your better flying units in the game for what you want them to do. Then you have access to Chaos Spawns. It's a pretty standard Chaos Spawn. It's unbreakable, does decent damage. It's poisonous. I guess it's kind of like a Nurgle version of it. I don't know. Doesn't have all the Nurgle bonuses. But you throw it in a battle, it will fight till it dies. It will kill some decent stuff. The combat stats aren't amazing though, so don't expect it to win battles on its own. You've got other units to do that. Finally, at the top, you have access to the Jabber Sly. So, this unit is quite interesting. It's really strong. It's very powerful. You're going to want to bring it. Does damage while it fights. Has a breath attack. Vortex around it. It's kind of like a mutated crazy dragon type thing, but it can't fly. Unless another lord or high-level monster units fights it, it's going to kill and easily kill most infantry units in its path. Hits hard, moves well, fights, poisons people, does magic attacks. It's pretty much anti any type of infantry. Just don't throw it against lords. They actually do pretty well against it. Further on, now you have the Centaurs. If you're wondering if there were centaurs in Warhammer, here they are. Pretty much. So these guys, shielded Centaurs, cav unit, moves fast. They're rowdy. They have perfect vigor, though, which means they can keep running around. Decent shot cav. Once you get this, your Razor Gores and Warhounds are pretty much obsolete. They're a better unit. Then you have Tuskor Chariots, which are your first chariot unit. They fight like other chariots. They charge into the enemies, knock them around, kill a couple, you run them out, you charge them in again. It's really up to you. They only have 4 units. They're a decent unit, though. There are better upgrades for them as you go further. And then you have Centaurs with great weapons. The big difference is one has shields, great weapons has armor piercing. Customize it to what you're fighting. Overall, though, you're going to want the ones with shields in case you come across a ranged enemy. Further on, up top, you have Razor Gore Chariots, which I would definitely take over the Tuskor ones if you have the opportunity to. Overall, good unit. Moves fast, hits hard, disrupts the enemy formation, causes fear and terror. Bring 1 or 2 to an army. That's about it. And then you have Centaurs with throwing axes. Honestly, I don't think I've ever used this unit. I don't think I ever will use this unit. It's got low range, decent melee missile damage, but that's about it. Its melee stats are not that great compared to its lower versions. Honestly, it should almost be down here. It will kill a fair amount of enemies before they get to it, but then once it gets into combat, it'll die to most anything. That's really the way to look at it. But the armor-piercing missiles is quite nice. If the enemy can't get to you, it's good. If the enemy can get to you, their ranged units are going to obliterate this thing. Further on, now we get to some of the fun stuff. The Minotaurs. But first, let's talk about the Gorbel, which is basically another melee specialist, but is a Minotaur. Now, it gets more damage, charge bonus, and armor piercing as it fights longer and it kills more enemies. It also buffs the allies in an area, which means it's a great frontline unit. And it causes fear. Overall, I would probably take it over the Wargore in my opinion, but it's kind of up to you. This one buffs melee defense and leadership. This one buffs attack, leadership, and charge. Combine the two, and you might actually have a half-decent bonus going together. And since they're not the same ability, they should stack. Just be aware that you have a limited capacity till you increase on heroes. Now, the Minotaur itself is a very strong unit. It's armor piercing. Overall, it's going to be one of your top infantry units. Gets stronger the more it fights. Great against pretty much everything except for arrows. I mean, it's not going to die instantly versus arrows, but that is a weakness of it. It needs to close with the enemy. Thankfully, it's a fairly fast unit. It hits hard. You don't really have to worry about it too much in melee combat, especially if you have other units around to draw some of the fire off of it. Further up top, you have Minotaurs with great weapons. So the big difference here, more charge bonus, more melee attack. Oops, I think my game froze. Yep, one sec. Okay, we're back. So big difference here, more attack, less about the same defense. Overall, pretty good upgrade. I would pretty much just, when I get Minotaurs with great weapons are better. However, you can get Minotaurs with shields. Again, difference here, great weapons, armor piercing, shields, range defense. It's up to you. Considering what you're likely to fight with the Beastmen, you probably want with the ones with the shield. You're not going to be fighting a lot of the melee-only factions. That's just my experience, but it's up to you. Pick which one you want. The armor piercing is a big difference, though. Further on, you have access to the Giants. This is a strong, powerful, monstrous unit. Single entity. Send it forward. Can smash its way through walls. Overall, it's a great unit because it's got strong leadership. It won't rout. It'll kill a fair amount of stuff. Keep other units around it because it's not the best at defending itself. But you don't have to worry about it too much in combat. It really should almost be a level 4 unit just because of how strong it can be used properly. And then finally, you have access to the Gorgon's Lair, which is your upgraded giants. So you have a Cygor, which is an artillery unit that is actually just a giant unit throwing boulders at the enemy, basically. That's kind of what it does. It throws from 400 range. Its missiles armor piercing. It kills plenty of the enemies, and if it gets into melee combat, it doesn't die instantly either. So that is important to note. It also has this very interesting Soul Eater penalty, which adds a miscast chance to all mages. This sort of solves some of the weaknesses the Beastmen have fighting magic users. It means the enemy are less likely to get them off. It's always worth bringing 1 or 2 of these to a battle. This allows you to force the enemy to come to you rather than you go to it. Surprisingly, for an artillery unit, it can take several hits, which means it's not particularly prone to being sniped from a mile away or having like ranged or flying units or cav flank and kill it instantly. Overall, it's one of my favorite artillery units in the game just because it's a tanky artillery unit. Further on, we get to the Gorgon, which is just a really strong melee fighter. It has regeneration. Now, it's not the same thing as the Jabberslythe. The Jabberslythe is absolutely nuts, but it's a nice complement to go along with it. The fact that it gets stronger with kills and it regenerates and it causes terror and fear. Throw it at the front enemy line, watch it tear through the base and basically all the infantry all the way up to their elites. It'll handle them. Don't worry about it too much. And then the last thing is the Shaman's Flame Pit. This is where you get your magic users, the Bray Shamans, Shadows, Beasts, Wild, and Death are the ones you get access to there. Overall, I don't tend to use tons of Beast Magic unit, but combining some of this wild stuff with it to buff and weaken the enemy can be very strong. Particularly this one here that summons units. There's a couple in each of theirs. You want to get one of these summoners early because one of your technologies requires you to summon several units in battle. And the actual tree here, obviously you can see these trees don't provide anything. However, the Immolation Grounds does provide some armor abilities to use, which is nice because you can get some explosions to kill enemies, disrupt walls, plus it gives you more magic. Further on, we'll just cover these buildings since we're here. Dread building goes up, gives an army ability. Kind of nice. Over here, we've got the Totem of Horns, which gives another army ability. You're noticing a lot of army abilities here. That is the Beastmen. More loot from post battles. More magic items drop chance. Can use Touched by the Moon more often. Makes the unit unbreakable. Really hard to kill. Do lots of damage. You can't use it on Lords and Heroes, sadly. But if you stick it on a unit of high-level Minotaurs or Gorgon or something, it will wreck everything in its path for the 45 seconds it's on. And then finally, the last one is a Desecrated Altar, which spreads corruption, gives you another army ability, reduces range on the enemy, and gets rid of their ammunition. This is very handy when fighting Wood Elves or High Elves or Dark Elves, in reality, any of the range users. I have a particular fondness for using this one and really hurting Skaven Gunners with it. I got like 3 Skaven Gunners with it. It was really nice. And that is the Beastmen's units and honestly their buildings as well, since we're here. So before we get into technology, which won't take long, I want to talk about how the Beastmen play. Obviously, you understand the Herdstones should be used to gain control of a region and then take everything out in the area. Now, one of the biggest problems you're going to have, at least till you get tons of dread and you upgrade your capacity in your horde, is that a lot of the enemy people you'll be fighting have better armies than you. Meaning direct conflict with them taking a settlement with an army in the city is almost impossible. The Beastmen rely a lot on trickery, which is why they can ambush enemy armies, which is really nice. You don't have a per se ambush stance yourself, but if you go into hidden encampment, you'll be invisible, and then you can use the Beastmen ambush to get them. You just can't get them as they march past you. You have to chase them down, which is fine. So early on, you might not be able to get a capital settlement here. I wasted several turns taking this. You can even take just a minor settlement. The Beastmen don't care if the settlement you take is minor or major. The only thing that matters is if you raise high-level settlements, you get more devastation and thereby more marks of ruin. So it's actually to your benefit, not necessarily to take the capital settlements. It just might be the easy thing to do to weaken the enemy. Now, once you have it, the Herdstone becomes your focus. You want to keep it intact as long as possible so you can get a ritual. So what you need to do is probably ambush your enemies around it, raise enemies around it. A lot of enemies will just come for you and try and kill you off because you'll be causing chaos and other public order disasters left and right. And if you can't stop the enemy, run away. That is the other thing with the Beastmen, is you need to be ready to run. So first off, charge in, try and take them out in one blow if you can. If you can't, you have to go to ambush mode. If you still can't fight them, run away. Once your Herdstone is destroyed, you'll get it back. You can set up shop anywhere else in the world, which is good because the Beastmen don't start in Lustria. They don't start in the Cathay area or any of those new wasteland areas. They're almost all in the old world, the Empire, Bretonia, Talea, or the area where the dwarves and orcs are fighting, the Western Badlands, or Tauros here, just south of Nagarond. And you're not going to win full-out wars with enemies. You'll either win them immediately or it'll be a slog. You don't really want to get too much into slogging fighting with these guys. You want to be more agile, raiding, pillaging, retreating. It's fine. As long as you've done the ritual, you get the marks of destruction, you can then lose the Herdstone. You don't have to defend it. I see a lot of people try and keep their Herdstone alive because it's my settlement and I can't use it, lose it. Now, the only reason you'd want to keep one Herdstone safe, and it might be worth setting it up on a tiny settlement in the middle of nowhere where it's protected, is so if you lose your army, you don't lose the game. As long as you have one of these, you can raise an army from it, and then you're off to a good start, and you can rebuild. Unless you fully wipe out a Beastman faction, they will come back and kill you later on. Okay, let's talk technology. So the Beastmen have a very small tech tree. It's not as straightforward as it appears, though. You have to meet certain requirements to unlock these. So the first one you're going to unlock is Plight of the No-Horns, which buffs your base units. They move faster, better aura, they fight better against factions, your Ungar units are stronger. This is a great tech tree. Don't look at it as a buff for bad units. Look at it a buff for the units you're going to be using for a while, no matter what. In which case, it's sorely needed. Take it, research it. You'll probably at some point get access to these other ones. Note at the top, this is 5 ambush battles. You win, you unlock this. This is 5 siege battles. You unlock this. This is 2 rituals of ruin, as in the Herdstone rituals. You unlock this. Now, you can skip around a bit here. You can do rituals of ruin before you win 5 siege battles. You're not forced to travel left to right through the line. So this first one is about Ungors. This next one is about Gore Hordes and Centaurs and ambushes. This next one is much more into monsters unit. So up top you have Chaos Warhounds, but you also have Manticores. And further down you have regeneration for your Chaos Bonds and Jabber Scythe units. This is worth getting. If you're ever going to use Chaos Spawn or Jabber Scythe, you need this tech. It makes them so much better in melee combat. And obviously, there's some base at the beginning. Days of Wrath is all about your Minotaurs and Giants and Gorgon units. If you're going to use them, which you should late game, this is how you're going to get the buffs to them. They become a lot harder to kill. The fact that you can get charge bonus for the Minotaurs, weapon strength, and armor means that you can have some very powerful flanking maneuvers on enemies. Ambushes, if you do an ambush battle with this faction, the odds are you're going to win, just not only because of the damage and the Vanguard deployment, but also causes fear. You get a lot of bonuses, and you have a pretty good ambush chance. Now at the bottom, these are another unlockable ones. When battles against 5 races, 3 horde stones in different climates, etc., etc., etc. This one, win 4 battles in a single turn. I don't know if this is different for the other ones outside of Taurox, but he's the easiest to do it with because he can do his rampage and fight them easily. This one is very good, Primal Fury. It upgrades the damage for all your units, makes it significantly better at what it does. And since all your units basically have that, it's a great thing to have. Strong Survive, reaching 15, you're obviously going to do it whenever you want. At that point, you start getting massive amounts of dread from battles. And over here, Horns of War, Guardians for your lords and heroes. This is huge. It can even be worth putting a capacity into upping your heroes and then training an additional 1 or 2 just so that you get this unlocked. Physical resistance to all allies in range if they're a lord or hero. Beastmen, lords, and heroes are monstrous fighters. This just makes them even stronger. You're pretty much a pure melee faction. Your range units outside of your artillery suck. Your cavalry isn't unbelievably amazing. You kind of charge into the enemy and you kill them. Similar to quite a few other factions. Greenskins, Nurgle, Khorne. I could go on. There are several factions. Vampires. They all just charge in and die. These guys, probably one of the stronger charge in and die factions. The only one I think that could equal you in pure melee without any magic or anything else might be the Khornite factions. I haven't actually done many battles against Khornite factions as the Beastmen. Suffice to say, I think you probably win them more than you'd expect because you don't have a lot of armor and some of their best units are mainly armor piercing. Okay, let's start with Tauros' starting location for the, starting locations and lords. So, Tauros the Brass Bull. Tauros the Brass Bull was the most recent one in Total Warhammer 2. He is the one that has that momentum mechanic I mentioned earlier with Rampage. It's cheaper for him to get Minotaurs. In terms of Tauros himself, Tauros is a monstrous high-level fighter, not just because of this. His stats are okay. It's more his weapon strength and the other various bonuses he gets later on. He's not as strong as he was in Total Warhammer 2 when he could just solo entire armies. No, he is weaker. He still can solo armies, but he will take damage this time. He gets Slaughterhorn when he raids. He gets a movement, but he gets less income. He adds River of Blood effects after winning battles in an area. Let's see if I can show you that. Don't seem to be able to show it there. Suffice to say, it hinders and disrupts the enemy's growth, and it makes it likely they might have revolts and stuff. Further on, all his units have blood. He has Blood Beast, and all his Minotaurs do more damage. So Blood Beast is an interesting ability. You'll want to use it. Basically, you can activate it. It does a giant explosion, burning damage for 6 seconds, 12 damage, armor piercing in an area. They become burnt, so more fire damage. You do fire damage, but also it lowers their leadership. This is great if you fight undead factions. It pretty well wrecks them. Otherwise, it's just an additional nice amount of damage you can add to an already stronger lord. So the Beastmen have a relatively standard blue line here. It's important to note this one here, which is normally just reduction of attrition for the Beastmen. It is casualties. Get movement, get casualty replenishment, right? This one, if you want a siege, is nice. This one, if you want more money from battles. This one for raiding and sacking. Honestly, though, I never had too many money problems in my campaigns. The replenishment, though, is nice. Unholy Resilience heals them on Taurox. This is really good because it means he's one of your strongest units. This keeps him fighting more. Lightning Strike. Honestly, you don't need this ability. You can take it, but the odds are you'll be ambushing most armies you attack, meaning you basically get a Lightning Strike battle anyway. It's up to you. Gathering a Beast. This is how to solve being away from your Herdstone means I have no recruitment problem. You get 2 recruitment slots. This gives you more. You'd have 5. You have even more at Herdstones. You can recruit like 10 or 12 units in one turn. It's pretty powerful. Spread Corruption. Honestly, I would ignore it. You shouldn't have too many corruption problems. You'll spread some anyway. Follow Premonitions. This is great to snag. The increased ambush chance is huge, considering you attack everybody in an ambush stance. Ambush defense chance, good if you're fighting Skaven or for some reason other Beastmen. Children of Chaos, Bestial Rage means you'll have better growth, less problems, better movement range. Does not give reduced upkeep because you have no upkeep, but the recruit rank is quite nice. It's pretty standard red line here. The only thing to note is the Apocalyptic Vision here provides a big boost to melee attack as well. Pick which one you're an upgrade early on. This one for the defense for your Ungors is pretty good. Further on, once you start to get to the Minotaurs and stuff, this is a huge buff to their attack and defense. So if you look at a Minotaur here, I don't know what I actually start with offhand, but it's going to be like 33, 34. Additional 6 is almost a 5% increase in damage, or 1/5 increase in damage, so it's pretty good. And at the end, these final ones, giving missile resistance and other damage, are quite nice as well. However, Tauros has the capability to be a single-handed fighter of armies. He's got a pretty standard yellow line. You might even neglect the red line to go down the yellow line, but first you want to get his special tree stuff. So at the start, he gets favored by corn, spreads corn corruption, but your army gets spell resistance, and he gets brass body, which he can activate to get an insane amount of melee defense and resistance. Basically, for the 41 seconds brass body is initiated, you'll be almost immune to damage in melee combat. Plus, everybody gets more resistance to spells, which is always good. The next one, he adds his next one, Juggernaut. You want to snag, adds dazed contact effect, which is great. Makes Tauros a hero and lord killer because they won't be able to defend or run away from him. Plus the charge bonus and the weapon damage is nice. Further on, more Bestial Rage. And here is the Rivers of Blood. Decreases leadership for non-chaos. Increases it. Spreads chaos corruption. Stacks 3 times. This will stack it twice. Okay. It's worth snagging. It's not one of the high priorities here, but you will want to get it eventually. Titans of the Deep Forest gives more Gorgons and gives armor for your elite monsters. Gorgons, Giants, Jabberslice, and Sigors. The capacity is nice. The armor is okay. Gore Feast, this is pretty strong for him. He heals now when he's in melee, and his Minotaur units now get stronger the longer they are in combat. Rather than Blood Greed, they now have Gore Greed. So again, focusing down on the Minotaurs. Demonic Vigor, Perfect Vigor, his abilities that he has, and he will get other ones. He gets a cooldown on them, which is really nice. Now you got to pick further on, and you can pick this at rank 5. So just be aware that this exists, because I've actually seen people go down this before realizing they could have picked one of these earlier. You can either pick between defense, word save, melee defense, plus defense on all Minotaurs, or terror, melee attack, and more attack on the Minotaurs. My opinion, the bullish metal with the armor and ward save, or melee defense and ward save, and then buff on defense for all your Minotaurs is better. Minotaurs do enough damage when they hit already. Keeping them alive longer is good. Plus, getting a word save on Taurox is really nice. Further up, it is worth snagging Shadow Hide and Uncanny Senses. Stack more resistance on a character with high armor. Good resistance, they become harder to kill. This Gouge Tux, all this does is give additional armor piercing damage. You already do armor piercing damage, but it's a nice boost. Voice of the Dark Gods. if you're having leadership troubles. Otherwise, ignore it. This one, army moves faster, vigor or loss. My advice, go blue line, get the replenishment, get the additional recruitment, ambush, ranks, then probably go down his yellow line. I'd probably snag Bullish Metal and Herd Lord early on around rank 5, then go down his yellow line, then go down his red line if you feel the need to do that. And that is Taurox the Black Bull. Gray ones, you got a variety of different magic. I'm not going to go into all the variety of magic. That would be a longer video than I can do. This is Lore of the Wild. Buffs, does damage, does a lot of damage. Some of them summons a unit, which is quite nice because one of your attack requires it. Big boost to attack and armor. You stick this on Taurox, all of a sudden he becomes an absolute monster killer. It's worth using. And Gray Shamans get eventually chariots and deal some decent damage as well. And that is Taurox the Black Bull, his stuff. Now let's go over his start. You start next to Karand, you get an initial battle. Now, you could progress to siege Karand, but you cannot take that settlement in battle. If you try and siege it, having auto-resolved the first battle and expect to auto-resolve the second, you will lose. What the AI will do, and you'll see it happen, is they will go over and take Storog Core. It's actually not a bad strategy. The only reason you take Karand is because it's a capital settlement, but you get no bonuses towards the capital settlement, so you can pretty much freely ignore it. So fight the initial battle, and then my advice is actually take Store Karag or go past it to the Venom Glade. Ignore Karand until you got more stuff to get more Marks of Ruination, sorry. And your start is pretty simple. Basically, you fight anyone who comes at you. You want to dominate your blood ground, pass your ritual. Afterwards, you've got a couple of choices. You can go east and fight Alathanar over here and set up another herd ground and just basically control this whole region. You can go south. Be aware if you go south, you'll start running across Morathi and some of the others. If you go north, you've got several options. First off, you'll be fighting some, these guys will be gone. There'll be dwarves. There will be Tomb Kings around there. Tomb Kings are a great prize for you if you can go after them, as you butcher them. And then further north, you have the Dark Elves. Be a little bit wary with the Dark Elves, but you can wreck them early on if you get there. Just be aware that killing the Dark Elves is relatively difficult unless you can get one of their major capital settlements quickly. Quite powerful, though, if you can kill them off. I love these blood grounds. If you want to pick the blood grounds that will help you the most, ideally, you want to start blocking off entire regions. So you don't want much overlap. If you have an overlap or an empty spot, ideally you want it in the middle or on the side. And then you can create entire regions of control. It's extraordinarily fun and powerful to pull off. Honestly, once you've done your first ritual in your first battle, you can kind of go anywhere you want. In my experience, the AI proves to be very incompetent about destroying herd stones, especially if you stick a plague nearby, weakening the enemy. Just stick around, try and get to level 2. Once you get to level 2, go nuts. Explore the world, go fight the High Elves, go fight the Dwarves, conquer Lustria. You can do it all with Taurox. And for your victory condition, you just, standard Beastmen, have a massive amount of Marks of Ruination, about halfway there. Fully defeat all these factions. Destroy Oak of Ages. This is a standard Beastman one, which is all the way, in case you don't know where it is, I will point it out on a map. It is down here in Athel Loren. It's right there. All the Beastmen have that as one of their major goals to wipe out. And have fun. Tauros is a very powerful lord. Gets stronger. You can stack a couple traits and bonuses on him. He becomes an absolute monster. On to the next lord. Okay, here we are as Khazrak the One-Eye. This is kind of the default Beastman Lord. You'll notice if you played Total Warhammer 2, he used to be down near Bretonia. Now he's up top. That's just a swap in starting locations with one of the other lords. So at the beginning of the game, Taurox starts at war with the Elves of Lower Lorne Forest and Middleland. You want to take Middleland. It's part of one of your victory conditions. It's slightly different than Taurox's is. You actually want to wipe it out. Supposedly, from what I understand, Boris Todbringer, the leader of the faction or whatever, took Khazrak's other eye. That's why he's a one-eyed monster. So Khazrak's bonuses: cheaper to upgrade Dread in all your capacity, makes them very strong, customizable, great at ambush, good at evasion. Considering you start in the middle of the northern part of the Empire, you need all the escape tools you can get. Now let's look at Khazrak's actual stats, and then we'll talk about it more. So his first stat: you don't receive as big of a penalty, and it's harder to find when you're hiding in a hidden encampment. All your Bestigors and Razorgore chariots get Vanguard deployment, allowing you to do ambushes and attack immediately at the start of the battle. Poison attacks for all your Unger units just makes your starting base units a little bit stronger. It's pretty cool because it applies to your archers, so you can weaken enemies from a distance. Now, Khazrak himself is actually a good fighter. Decent stats. Honestly, they look better than Taurox's. In a duel, Taurox would win, though. Just be aware of that. Standard blue line, similar stuff to what Taurox has. You definitely want the replenishment rate. You definitely want the ambush chance and the recruitment capacity. Standard red line. Standard yellow line. Now, in terms of his actual interesting stuff, better ambush chance, more attack and defense while ambushing. Better reinforcement range, better chance of intercepting people going by. Over here, big buff to some of your base infantry tree here. This cloven ones, big boost to that combat stats of all of those. Makes them a lot stronger. Still not as strong as their monsters, but it gives you a much easier mid to late game. Getting there is a lot easier. Boost to your hounds, herds, and harpies units. Manslayer, huge buff when you're fighting empires. It's really good at killing empire units. The terror is particularly handy. Magic stuff is honestly neglectable. Feral Fever gives stock, meaning basically all your low level monster units and a couple of your infantry units get stock, meaning it's very hard for the enemy to find you and catch you, and you get reduced vigor, meaning you can flank easily, strike hard, strike fast. You can even wander outside of forest without worrying about being detected. You've got the standard boost here, similar to what Taurox has. Less, because he doesn't have a specific unit to buff. Attack, weapon strength for the whole army, missile defense, missile resistance for the whole army. I would take Rune of True Beast and Slugskin. Missile resistance is going to be way more useful than weapon strength, especially if you fight anybody with decent range units, which the Empire has, as do the Wood Elves. Other than that, everything else is pretty normal. You get a mount, you can get the Razorgore Chariot. Be aware that if you toss your unit in the Razorgore Chariot, its actual fighting combat stats go down significantly, so don't expect Khazrak to be a Lord Killer anymore. I didn't mention Tauros Quest, but I will mention Khazrak's here. Khazrak, attack. The cool thing here is this active ability of Scourge. You can use this buff, and suddenly Khazrak turns into quite the infantry and even Lord Killer while using it. Also makes them stronger in combat. Over here, though, the Dark Mail is worth pointing out. This is a huge buff. Armor, spell resistance, and damage resistance while in melee. You want Khazrak to be fighting pretty much all the time. While you don't have regeneration, you really don't need it because you'll have a lot of damage resistance. And overall, just decent quests. It's worth snagging them. Just be aware that your location isn't great. You'll start with the ability to attack the Wood Elves here. Honestly, I might not even fight this initial battle. You can. It's not going to get you really anything other than one battle under your belt and some experience. You're not going to be able to take Lorelorn here. With another army and a garrison there, it is out of your hands, at least for several turns, unless you're a micro fighter where you command the battles perfectly and you don't lose any units, which is difficult while fighting Wood Elves with a huge range. If you take Lorelorn Forest, it makes a nice base. If you don't, you've got other options. So you're at war with these guys right here, Middenheim. You're not at war with the ogres, the orcs, the greenskins technically, or the other two empires nearby. Honestly, though, I might go pick a fight with the Empire if I were you. In my experience, the best starting move is to move north and take Dieter Schaffen. Set up your herd stone there. It gives you easy escape. If you need be, you can hop in the ocean and sail away. It means that all your enemies will be to your south, so you don't have to worry about getting flanked. It's a much more defendable position. Plus, once you take it and set up a herdstone there, you can ambush the next army coming for you and then wipe them out pretty quickly. Nordland. Be aware that Middenheim here, or Midland, will come after you, but you have a long time to see them coming where you can do ambushes. Now, you do start out with a Bray Shaman, and it is worth sticking in your army. I recommend, though, probably using it for scouting in the first several turns to make sure that, say, Boris Todbringer doesn't track you down and kill you on turn 2 or 3. Just knowing some vision where the army are, because you're outnumbered and in hostile territory, information is honestly better early on than having a hero in an army. The hero will not decide the battle if 2 armies catch you off guard. It's not going to happen. Be aware that this stance means you are really hard to catch. You can move while using it. So if you sit in some of these areas like right here where the AI is not going to wander by, you're almost entirely undetectable and you can wait. Be aware the AI does in fact know where you are. They're just kind of told to ignore it. They don't ignore it as much as they did in Total Warhammer 2, so they still won't entirely leave, which makes it semi-annoying to play this faction. You want to secure this upper area if you can. I really wouldn't pick a fight with the greenskins, even though they are part of your blood grounds. Deal with the Empire. At some point, you're probably going to want to get over here and either kill or ally these Warriors of Chaos. They do like you, so you can start with a non-aggression pact, but you can still get hit by their plagues, which is rather annoying at times. Plus, they'll start taking lands in your blood grounds. Taking them out is actually pretty easy. Your faction absolutely wrecks the Warrior of Chaos Nurgle one. Just you want some armor penetration first. And then the northern part of your empire is yours to play with. You can either stay here, you can leave, you can go fight up in Norska. Norska is actually pretty easy for you to fight because they don't have really range either, so it's melee versus melee. If they get their monsters before you get your monsters, though, they will beat you. Enjoy. You get along pretty well with the Chaos faction, so you don't have to. And that is pretty much Khazrak. In the long run, you got to get to Athaloran, which thankfully isn't far away. Be aware you can pass under mountains, so you can just jump up here, take dwarves, and then just jump straight to Oak of Ages from here. You don't have to march through the forest and take attrition. And that is Khazrak 1i. Standard Beastmen start. Great at leveling up and customizing your army more than the other factions. Okay, here we are with Morghur the Shadowgave. So this is arguably, I think, the easiest Beastmen start. If you're new to this is the faction you probably want to try playing as. So, Morghur the Shadowgrave has some unique stuff. First off, you're way more into corruption than other people. Your horde builds better, you replenish better, you get chaos spawns, and you spread more corruption. Very nice basic bonuses. Morghur themselves gives raiding stances upgrade to Despoilers, which spreads corruption and attrition. Now, this requires a little explaining of what it does. Once you're raiding in an area, if the enemy can take attrition, they will. They do know where you are, though, so they will probably try and take you out. And with the vigor reduction, you will take you're weaker. You do spread a lot of chaos corruption, though, so given time, you can very quickly cause chaotic problems and then attrition if they come for you. They can get both your attrition and chaos attrition, which is kind of funny. So let's continue looking at that. Just pointing that out is all the Beastmen have slightly different stances. You're immune to Athaloran attrition, which means it's much easier for you to take out the Wood Elves up in Athaloran. In fact, that's kind of your big mission. Morghur is only ever wounded by 1 turn. Basically, if you lose your army, Morghur will be back. Your army is resistant to spells, which is handy, and you spread more corruption. Now, you have this other one, Aura of Vile Transmutation. That is up here, while Morghur damages everything around them. So in combat, you're going to be hitting enemies around you, even if you're not beating them in melee combat. You can station it behind your lines to hurt the enemy, or you can throw him into the middle of combat and he will do damage. So let's look at the other stuff. So you've got your standard blue line. Actually, I should mention this. You have this Spirit Essence of Chaos. If an enemy is low hit points, you can summon this on them. It basically will wipe them out. Instead, spawn chaos spawns. It deserves a mention because it's very powerful. You can do a lot of damage to the enemy. It's great against Bretonnia because you can target like Grail Knights with it and blow them up. It's really funny. It activates automatically though, so just be aware it might not trigger on the people you want it to. But if you can, it can be a great finishing off an enemy. Standard yellow line, pretty standard. Red line as well. The yellow and red lines make you a decent melee fighter. You already have poison. Morghur will become even stronger. But let's get into the stuff that makes Morghur rather unique. Standard Manbane Rune of True Beast that Khazrak has. I still recommend the missile resistance. You already have high missile resistance. Adding more, you can get Morghur up to 95% missile resistance, which is absolutely nuts. You won't die to range attacks, basically. Your actual interesting stuff, you have Primal Fury for your whole army. More attack, more charge, more speed. It's nice. Abstractions of Teach, or Zeech, as people will say. Regeneration, more damage for all your Chaos stuff. Your Jabber's Life will do more damage. Chaos will heal. They'll all have more damage. Overall, great ability. You're all about using the high level chaos and monsters. This makes it easier. Force for change. You give more casualties when you're raiding enemies in the area, and you make more money from raiding, which is nice. Herald of Corruption, more chaos. You move significantly faster, all told 20% more, not including text. Then you get Profane Blessings. These are some really powerful ancillaries, banners, and various other stuff that you can stick on a unit and give them an insane buff. I tend to recommend sticking them on Minotaurs, unless the buff is something that's amazing on monsters. If you get one with regeneration or something, that's worth throwing on them. And then finally, Touch of Corruption. Enables Touch of Corruption when you're around somebody and you hit them. They take more damage over time. Does combine with Aura Vial Transmutation for a surprising amount of damage in melee combat. Up top, you get Bloodlust, buffs your weapon damage. And of course, more spell and more Shadow Hide resistance. All told, you start with 45. This gets you to 60. You're pretty much immune to missile and spell damage. You have to be killed in melee combat, which means taking the yellow line and boosting it can be nice. You are not unbreakable, though, so that does mean you will rout at a certain point. You do have regeneration, which is just really awesome. Overall, weaker in melee than some of the other Beastmen Lords, but the trade-off is you're basically immune to range and spell damage. You have a couple quests. In this case, you have one major quest. Sorry, most have more than one. Stave of Corruption, more chaos spread, more chaos spawns. All told, you get +6 just by being this faction, plus the initial one. So you can have like 7 chaos spawns, and you can get them pretty early on, and they're stronger. Plus, you can spawn more of them, which is kind of nuts. More magic attacks, melee attack in general. Overall, a great buff. This is huge, summoning chaos spawns and getting a capacity. It is worth doing this quest just for that alone. Now, your starting location, you are immediately west of Skavenblight, down near Estalia. This is a great starting location because there are no major threats. In fact, the biggest threat you're going to see at the beginning is Bretonnia, followed by the Skaven. So I recommend Montanas here is kind of setting you up for this to be your starting area. Take it, set down a blood ground. You'll see it spreads very nicely in the whole area. Be aware that Skavenblight here and Scryer, they're going to take these two settlements. If you can avoid fighting them, that's to your advantage. If you do fight them, try and wipe them out. The Skaven are a blight on the world and will cause more trouble, even though you're a bigger blight. It's quite easy to take these other the other two settlements here. Margritta, though, will take a little bit longer. I found the best luck to take it was get an ambush set up here and try and trick them to come out to take your Herdstone. You might not be able to pull it off. If you can, then you're going to build up a nice ritual, and then I would trigger the Herdstone, and then you can leave. I recommend, if you don't have to fight the Skaven, you go north and fight the Fey Enchantress here in Bretonnia early on. Bretonia sucks early game without their cav. You will absolutely wreck their peasants. Just be wary of Enchantress's magic and any cav. Then, if you want to, you can use your immunity to Athaloran to try and finish off the Wood Elves. Your long-term goal is to kill off one of the Wood Elves, kill off Enchantress, and kill off Estalia, which you'll basically do at the beginning anyway. But further on, for the full campaign victory, you have to take Oak of Ages. You can do it faster than any other Beastmen faction. It's actually kind of almost too easy at this point if you play right. And then just proceed sacking and raising your way up through Bretonia, more herdstones. Be aware that the new distance between Ulthuan and Bretonia means that the High Elves, if they don't get killed by Nikari of Slaanesh faction, will get involved and come after you. But you can avoid that by just raising the settlements on the border, station all your herdstones inland, and instead try to avoid the coast as much as you can and fight out here with the dwarves. It's quite easy for you to get to the Empire, especially because you can jump the mountains. You can punch your way through this pass here, spell out, conquer stuff. Khazrak tends to not last very long, but you can bring them back with the rewards of Dread and go nuts that way. It's quite fun. Overall, that is Morghur the Shadowgrave. Really not so amazing in melee combat, but really good against magic and range, and all about the Chaos Balls and high-level monsters. Very fun faction to play. Probably the easiest Beastman start, in my opinion. On to the last Beastman Lord. Okay, here we are as the last Beastman one. Malagor the Dark Omen. First off the bat, Malagor has wings, and unlike Scarbrand, can actually fly, which is kind of cool. Malagor here has a decreased upkeep for Dread, or for unlocking hero capacity. This allows you to get quite a few heroes early on. You can move faster. Your heroes get recruited at a higher rank. +5 if you get all the way down the upkeep of Dread here, so that your heroes are at rank 15. That will recruit instantly immortal heroes and lords, which is just absolutely nuts. I think you're the only faction in the game that can pull that off without trying very hard. Malagor themselves over here, they have Crowfather. Enemies don't replenishment in their range. You move further when you're using basically the underway Beast Pass stance. Enemies have lower leadership. Your Harpy unit cause fear, which is just kind of odd. Harpies aren't amazing. They'll be a little bit better under Malagor, but nothing amazing. Malagor themselves, decent melee combatant, but they're way more into magic. In fact, you start with Flock of Doom, and you get other ones. You do have something wicked this way comes. Nearby enemies lose leadership. This can stack with stuff like fear and other stuff. You recharge decently well, and you get a bonus towards fighting. But the big thing is you can fly, meaning you can stay out of melee combat and just cast spells. You've got a standard blue lime. You have a standard red lime. Then you get into some more interesting stuff. So the first one, let's go down as unique stuff first. Enemy leadership -9. That is huge. You can stack it with fear. You can stack it with something wicked this way comes, and enemies are looking at like a 22, 23 debuff to their leadership at the beginning of the battle. Against low-level enemies, they'll just run at the first sign of combat, basically. Winds of Magic, always good. This one gives you more harpies. Missile strength up and speed. Now, right now, at the start, you don't have a missile, so this is a little bit less helpful than you would imagine it would be. Further on, Portents of Doom, control on the enemies, and now you cause terror, meaning even more leadership problems for the enemies. Nightmarish Cabal, it's cheaper for you to use Bray Shamans, and they have a better chance of success. Mantle of Crows, this is Unending Flock of Doom. It's constant. It's no longer a spell cast. Now it's just always around it. Although, do note, this does 62 to 125. This does 12 to 24. So it is less damage per second, but you get it constantly. Over here, you again have slightly different options. Weapon strength, charge bonus, weapon strength for basically all the chaos monsters. Over here, armor, melee defense, or armor for the chaos monsters. It's really up to you what you would do. I personally like plus 15 armor. It means even your trash Chaos Warhounds suddenly are a little bit more dangerous. Further down here, you've got more magic. This one, restore vigor and charge to your allies when casting. Wild Heart, more magic. Life Leeching, more magic. Smoke and Mirrors, a big buff as well. And Doom of Mankind, Winds of Magic. This is your magic buff tree. Here is your magic tree. More Flock of Doom. Enfeebling Foe, which is quite nice for weakening enemy lords. An Emerald Pendulum. This is going to be one of your big damage ones, but you might not need it if you use Doom and Darkness upgraded for an additional negative 16 leadership combined with your others. You can get up to about 40 or so leadership reduction on a single unit, which is absolutely crazy. It will rout almost all your low level enemies used properly. Gorok here, huge buff. Stick it on one of your strongest units and they will get significantly better. Savage Dominion summons a Cygor, which is just great because they do a lot of damage. And then more magic. Overall, though, nothing 100% amazing. Like, I really don't like Malagor, even though they are a stronger spellcaster than the other Beastmen. And yes, they do provide immense leadership debuffs. They don't really buff anything. Yes, you get more Harpies, but who cares about Harpies? I'm gonna be honest. Harpies are pretty well trash. That's about it. Quest-wise, you have a quest. More Bray Shaman, higher recruitment, cheaper construction, more growth, icons of vilification, boost leadership around you. Overall, I think Malagor is probably the weakest of the Beastmen Lords. You start here in the Badlands region, the Western Badlands area. You start at war with the Vampire Counts, Sires of Morghur. This is the one that they're setting you up to start your blood grounds at. It's worth doing. Be aware that Scarbrand is right here. You don't have any issues with Scarbrand, but he will start either occupying or taking the area around you. You can stop his automatic colonization by sticking blood ground here. You'll really cut off Scarbrand's initial expansion. Be aware, though, that these top-knot orcs and then Wurzag to the north, they don't like you. They are strong enough to beat you early game, so you have to play rather smart. Thankfully, this terrain here is relatively terrible to march through. So most people will be using underways or beast paths to get through it. Great for ambushing and other stuff. You start with a gore bowl. Definitely throw this into your army. You're going to want the damage because Malagor doesn't provide it really on their own. Here's where this is what applies to all the heroes, but I'll mention it here because it's worth mentioning. This is a really good buff to your units in an area. I really recommend melee attack, especially if you're going to try and use Harpies or something. Since you don't have any major boosts to units, getting an additional 15 melee attack is probably more than 23 armor and missile defense. But if you wanted to, you could stack that with Malagor's armor for the whole army, and all of a sudden you could have a very tanky group of low-level units. Overall, though, not my favorite Beastman Lord. Tends to get wiped out. Your initial expansion pack is relatively obvious. Fight top knots because they surround you on all sides. Establish your herdstone. Finish off the vampire counts, which you can do first or second. If you can pull it off first, it's worth doing just so that they're gone. Then you turn on the orcs along with Scarbrand. Try and become friends with whoever you can. Scarbrand is possible to get a non-aggression pact with. If you do, that's great because he'll just cause so much havoc that setting up your herdstones and raiding and pillaging, it'll draw fire off you. Honestly, I recommend expanding north. If you expand south, you start to get into the wider area with more Tomb Kings, and then further south, Manfred and Volkmar down there. If you go north, all you have to deal with is Greenskin, then Dwarves, basically. Both of which you can easily customize to fight against. Be aware if you fight Dwarves or the Greenskins, you're probably going to want armor penetrating units with more great weapons than anything else. But be aware, being Beastmen, you can just pack up and leave to another area of the world if you don't want to fight here, which is entirely a good strategy as this faction, but not needed if you play them correctly. And that is it for this video. Hopefully this guide will help you learn to play the Beastmen better and explain some of their slightly confusing mechanics. There's a lot of them. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment below, like, subscribe, ring the bell, tell me what I did wrong in the comments or I did right. And I hope to see you in another guide video or something else. Remember that all the guide videos are part of a giant playlist, Total Warhammer 3 guides that you can access either from this video at the end or from my channel page. And thank you guys all for watching. I do appreciate it. Hope to see you again sometime. Bye for now.